Live from Studio 67 in Florida's capital county, it's time to get fact-checked.
Access granted.
What's up, good people of Florida? Welcome to Week 7 of the 2025 legislative session. We are back with Fact Check, and I'm going to get a quick roll call here. What's going on, guys?
Hey, everybody. Happy Thursday.
Hey, guys. What's going on?
That was Courtney and Peter, and obviously your host with the most, Jared. And we are trying to keep morale high up here in Tallahassee. It's the time of year when people are getting very creative. We're seeing bills that were once dead brought back to life, grafted onto, new vehicles. And so, our head's on a swivel and we got to keep our guard up here. But with that being said, we are going to go ahead and rip the Band-Aid off. Unfortunately, we ran into some regretful political realities on the House floor with the term limits vote. Courtney, you want to expand a little on what went down this week?
Yes. So, President Burrows came into town. Him, Jeff, Jared, Peter, and I worked upon our hardest efforts to move this bill down.
I think we hit every office in the House.
We did. We've talked to every representative around here. And as we did make some momentum to convince members to vote down on the bill, we came across some political hurdles day of. Representative Salzman presented her bill on the floor, and it passed. Party line.
Party line, with one exception, the brave Representative Chad Cracker Johnson, who, I think was looking out for his small counties here. And, I think we had some, let's say, tacit support from a number of Republicans, but unfortunately, they decided to band together as a caucus and support the bill for Rep. Salzman. So unfortunately, it did pass on the House side. Bill still has a number of problems. We have been maintaining from the beginning that there's two big issues here, and neither of them are whether term limits are good or bad. It's purely that it's going to supersede local charters, and that, putting it on a statewide ballot is going to have the larger counties essentially holding more weight in their vote than the smaller counties. So, unlike what Representative Salzman said on the floor, this is nothing like voting for governor or statewide office.
She keeps using this analogy that it's the same as voting for the governor, but it's not.
What, are we gonna have 67 governors?
Correct. That's what would happen.
Yeah, you can't have more than one governor, but you can absolutely have, unique county, local government structures. So,
and the process for picking a speaker in a chamber in the House of Representatives is much different than the process for voting on county commissioners.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, Thursday?
Yeah, it was Wednesday.
Wednesday was a somber day, unfortunately. But, now we get to do it all over again in the Senate, where as of right now, I'm going to knock on some wood, the bill has kind of run out of momentum.
Yeah, it hasn't made it out of its second committee, so, the House is going to send this over in messages, and the Senate theoretically doesn't have to take it up right now because it never made it out of its committees. And on just one other note, if you guys get a chance to go back and watch it, the Democrats on the floor made some of the greatest arguments against this, and just bringing in Washington, bringing in how we say local government has a voice, but then we're stripping it, and where did this magic number 8 even come from? And so if you guys get a chance to go back and watch it, I would, and definitely...
Hey, Commissioner Larry Harvey said it in committee.
Yeah.
It takes more than 8 years just to build a road a lot of times.
A lot of times it does, yeah.
We'll be tackling that one as it comes up in the Senate, though. Again, God willing, I think this thing is hopefully facing an uphill battle over there. With that being said, we got another dogfight, but fortunately or unfortunately, depending how you want to look at it, utility relocation has had some recent developments where it feels like one step forward, one step back.
Chris Doolin.
Yeah. Peter, you want to tell us what's going on there?
So, all the stakeholders involved, whether it's the legislature, cities and counties, have been having conversations on how to, perhaps balance the liability of these relocation costs. An amendment that essentially creates a grant program within the Department of Commerce that would reimburse relocation costs by these providers. So going further into that, each jurisdiction would divert about 7.5% of the communication service tax that consumers are charged for purchasing these products, and that 7.5%, which statewide between cities and counties, I believe, amounts to $50-something million, would be then remitted to the Department of Commerce. And each provider, when performing these relocations, would then apply to get their... So they would be paying outright in the beginning, but then they would apply to get their costs reimbursed. There is also a section of the amendment that includes somewhat of a little bit of a different system with regards to the state and the Department of Transportation. That's more on a project-by-project basis, where the providers would negotiate cost sharing with the state in that case. The bill passed unanimously. The bill and the amendment passed unanimously.
And we thought this was its final committee stop.
Correct. But it seems as the amendment might have really opened some eyes to the cost that the state might have to be responsible for these relocation costs. We at FAC tried to have a public discussion about the financial impact, and it looks like this amendment finally did the trick, and the bill was re-referenced to appropriations.
Yeah, and I think, to that point, Peter, the costs as the bill was filed were going to be astronomical, and I think the appeal of, kind of diverting this 7.5% of CST revenues is that now you've got kind of a fixed pool of money to play with. I think we were concerned early on that, CST wouldn't even be enough to cover the costs in a lot of these counties, especially when we're talking about, miles of road, potentially 3, 4, and 5, utilities in any given right-of-way at any given time. And so this at least puts a limit on it where we can say, this is earmarked for these projects, but we're not going to have to dip into GR or,
Correct.
Move money around to make this work.
Correct.
And, I think the other consideration there is, they're not going to want to disincentivize us to build roads, expand roads, and that's kind of where we're heading.
We're a fast-growing state.
Yeah, that's where we were heading. Is that if counties are faced with the choice between paying a small fortune and just taking a bath on value here, it's a pretty simple calculation. They're going to have to adjust 5-year plans and all this stuff. So.
And obviously none of this is, this is a work in progress as we speak. We'll see how the conversation continues in Senate appropriations. It is a step in the right direction.
Well, appreciate that update, Peter. And now we got one more committee stop to kind of put a dent in this thing, hopefully, and gives us a chance to either get it right or alternatively, hopefully kill it altogether.
Yeah,
I think
would be
none of us would lose sleep if this
That'd
thing
be
never
great.
saw the light of day. But, I think getting it right is kind of the priority in the meantime. I got a quick environment update for everyone. We had several bills moving through committees as well as the floor this week. You might recall the Senate Emergency Management Package passed off the floor already, including the stormwater language from what was once Senator Burgess's Senate Bill 810. That was the annual stormwater inspection mandate. Another, hefty price tag there. And from the beginning, Rhett McFarland, who was running the House companion of that emergency management bill, maintained that she really wanted to keep that Burgess language at arm's length. That, in her case, she felt as though, perhaps the cure was worse than disease here. And so, when it came down to it this week, her bill was up in committee. We worked very closely with her to, give Senator Burgess something to kind of alleviate some of the concerns that he saw within his district last hurricane season as far as flooding and stormwater management, but without, overly burdening the stormwater operators themselves. Where we landed is, rather than that annual inspection mandate that would have captured just, the entire universe of structures, we landed on a program that actually brings in DEP and the water management districts, because, stormwater management is a very kind of comprehensive, holistic exercise here. To point the finger or put the burden on, just the counties and cities was always, I think, a little bit short-sighted there. And so now we're bringing in DEP to administer an annual inventory, inspection and then maintenance program, and the discretion on, how routinely these structures are inspected will be up to DEP, in coordination with the local stormwater operators. So I think that we found a solution that kind of fits for everyone, where priority structures will be getting the attention they deserve, but while also maintaining an eye for cost effectiveness and just remaining pragmatic here. While I'm talking about the emergency management package, there were also some questions about the moratorium on local development regulations and comp planning that are more restrictive or burdensome than what's already being done. And a number of committee members did bring that up in committee today. I believe that language got amended out of the Senate version, and so I think we're hoping to see that the House ultimately match that as much as possible. Shifting gears real quick, we also saw the waste to energy and waste incinerator siting preemption move in a couple different places now. As I've mentioned before, they're kind of hedging their bets on this one, and this all really stems back to a Miami-Dade County issue where, their prior waste to energy facility burned down a couple years back in Doral, and now they're looking to limit where a new replacement facility can be sited. So initially this started with House Bill, I think it was 1008 by Senator Avila, obviously doing this on behalf of his district and a couple of his delegation members that, raised this concern. But that Senate bill ultimately looked like it was going to stall. I think it only passed its first committee, and so he kind of grafted that language onto a different vehicle, Senate Bill 1822 by Senator Martin, which deals with kind of an existing preemption on plastic containers. That bill got a broader scope. It's now called, I think, waste management. And so this does have that siting preemption, precluding any local government from issuing a construction permit within a mile of the smokestack on one of these incinerator facilities. This language has been limited to Miami-Dade in this bill. So I think early on, a lot of the concern was that it was going to hit existing facilities elsewhere throughout the state. But at least in Senate Bill 1822, the preemption is fairly limited to Miami-Dade County. However, in the House version, House Bill 1609 by Reps. Weinberger and Barrero, there is no such limitation. It still applies to the entire state. There is a grandfathering clause, although we are still kind of working out some of the technical details on that. And I know there was some skepticism from a couple counties that the grandfathering clause was actually going to appropriately capture, their existing facilities, or facility upgrades or modernizations that might be planned in the near future. So I think the messaging here is number one, that this is really a local issue for Miami-Dade County and should be handled internally down there. But alternatively, I think the more we're limiting the siting of these facilities, the more you're going to see, monopolies from private haulers, rates going up, or alternatively seeing, more waste diverted to landfills in other counties, which again is also going to cost more, more stress on the roads. And so again, these are a couple bills that we're having to tackle from a couple different vantage points here, but that hopefully we can either, mitigate their impact or stop entirely here. I think that's all I got for you guys on the environment update. So with that being said, I am going to pivot back to Courtney for a growth management update.
Awesome. Growth management. To kick it off, construction regulations, it's House Bill 683 and Senate Bill 712. This was the turf bill when it first started, expanding that we could not preempt synthetic turf, and there was some change order language in there. It has now become one of those vehicles that Jared was talking about earlier, where everyone has dumped a bunch of stuff into it, including some pool contracting and security alarm systems. But the parts that we truthfully still care about are the change order language. It did change it from 30 days to 35 days. We are trying to work on this language to get a bit of a fix in there. The other portion of this that we care about down at the bottom that was added in talks about private provider for single trade inspections. We are watching this closely, as this did just open up the world of private providers, which I have been
that world's getting pretty big, isn't it, Courtney?
Speaking on this whole session, fighting that battle for you guys. Right now, we don't have a huge problem with it. So that one we're monitoring that one very closely.
Thanks, Courtney. And just one thing I wanted to add on the synthetic turf preemption. Early on, that was a pretty unilateral preemption, and since then they have amended it to at least require DEP to adopt minimum standards.
Correct. So you cannot buy Chinese turf on the internet.
Correct. And so obviously I think we would prefer to see this on a county by county basis, to meet specific needs. But far too often we see the state, preempt entire spaces and then do absolutely nothing with that new authority. So at least DEP will be in charge of adopting kind of some minimum rules here. I just wanted to add that real quick.
Yeah, thanks, Jared. And the second large growth management bill that we've been tracking this week is Senate Bill 1080 and House Bill 579. 1080 started off as a bill dealing with comp plans and development permits and orders, and now it has become another large vehicle for what used to be 1118, the Ag Enclave bill. This week, the House bill didn't pick up all of the correct amendment changes, so it was actually temporarily postponed, but the Senate bill did make it through committee. It is very similar to 1118, but we did get out that administrative approval portion.
Well, 1118 had a number of different development restriction, or, local preemption, development preemptions.
Yeah.
And when it appeared that it was running out of steam here, they decided to kind of scrap it for pieces.
Yep.
But I know they mentioned from the very beginning that ag enclaves was sort of the priority within that bill. So this is where it found a new home.
Yep. So ag enclaves has stuck along in here, and like I was saying, in the House bill, it didn't grasp all the correct amendments. So there is still the Planet Fitness language, as we are calling it in the office, but it was the amenity fee language. And Senator Bradley actually debated this one pretty heavily in committee. She was like, we are not doing that in this bill. So she wanted to make sure it stayed out of there. But this one's going to be another big vehicle moving, and we'll see what happens with it. But right now it's on its way to the floor whenever it gets agenda'd. The only other growth management bill I was going to talk about is affordable housing. Senate Bill 1730 did make its way off of the Senate floor. It is in House messages. On the floor, it did take up an amendment that decreased the parking from the original 20% that was filed in the bill to 10%. So upon the applicant's request, local government will now have to reduce parking by 10%, where it used to be 20%. The other big thing that changed during this amendment was recreational uses for industrial and mixed use were not included, and now they have deleted that portion out of those definitions, given it its own place in the bill, and they are allowable uses. So any proposed development on a parcel of land designed as a golf course, tennis court, or swimming pool, regardless of its zoning categories, you can now build affordable housing on. So we will see what happens. Rebecca from the League of Cities and I myself have worked very closely with Representative Lopez to work on the House version of this bill. So we will see what happens when it comes out next week and see where we stand in the middle of the two. And that's all I have on growth management.
Thank you for the update, Courtney. And while we're on the topic of, just absolute behemoth bills here, the Rural Renaissance Package that has been, Senate President Albritton's legacy project from the very beginning appears to have hit a wall in the House a little bit. It got TP'd this week, and I think we've still been looking for them to match the Senate language. We like where that landed when it was passed off the floor, but the House has been dragging their feet a little bit here, and it did get temporarily postponed in its second committee stop. I have been asking around on what the hang-up is exactly. This might be kind of part of that chess match between, the presiding officers within the legislature, but just wanted to give you guys that quick update. We will let you know what's going on there as soon as we have more public details on this one. But with that being said, does that wrap us up for the week, folks?
I think that wraps us up. Happy Easter for all those that celebrate.
Happy Easter to everyone. Thank you for listening as always, and stay in the course. Knock on wood, we've got 2 more weeks after this.
And if you would like
dare
to
I even
get,
say it?
guys, we have a bet going on when this thing is really going to end. It's $20 to Peter, day and time, and he's administering
it
that.
It is not Price is Right rules. You can go over.
Yep. It's whoever is closest. That's why you need a day and a time.
Closest down to the minute. Yep. But as always, appreciate you guys listening. And if you have any questions at all, you know where to find us.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Take care.